He allowed her to get behind the wheel of his car. They had all just smoked marijuana. And then they got in Chase's car, left that park. They only made it a few miles before the driver lost control in a curve, running about 70 miles per hour. You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. Hi, my name is Darryl Rodgers, also known as the Family Recovery Coach. Welcome to the very first episode of When God Intervenes. I know you're going to get a lot out of this podcast. Now, I'm starting off the very first episode solo, but I'll be interviewing a lot of guests coming up. And there are people who have stories of recovery, stories of tragedy. There are also people that I've interviewed already whose episodes will go up, who are people working in and around the treatment industry in various capacities. So you'll get a lot of information, a lot of knowledge from listening to this podcast, and a lot of entertainment value, I think, as well, just from the stories. The stories are going to be very captivating. And I just wanted to come on and for the very first episode, like I said, fly solo and just let you know a little bit about what God Intervenes is going to be about. So, where did I come up with this title, When God Intervenes? Where did I come up with this title? Maybe you've heard the saying before that a coincidence is when God intervenes and chooses to remain anonymous. Well, I think it's more like when God intervenes and we refuse to give him credit or we fail to give him credit. So he's always intervening in our lives. And a lot of times we just don't notice. We just don't notice that it's God, or we don't give him credit. The original quote was, "Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous." And it's been attributed to Albert Einstein, although it can't be validated that he ever said that. And what about the intervention part? Well, I'm an interventionist, and there's a whole story behind that. And I've been on this journey for a while. So it's sort of a play on words, when God intervenes, because an interventionist's job is really to facilitate the meeting, but it's really God who performs the intervention. So who am I, and how did I get started with this podcast? What gave me the idea for this podcast? Well, my background is in aviation. I started out very young as a pilot. I have an older brother, who's much older than I am, who was a helicopter pilot. And when I was a teenager growing up, sometimes he would land the helicopter in our yard. We lived out in the country and we had plenty of space, and he could just land the helicopter in our yard and come in and stay with us for a little while and then get back in the helicopter and take off. And I thought that was the coolest thing, as a teenager. So I put together a plan with my brother's help, with a lot of help from him and my parents, to become a helicopter pilot. And I started out in my teenage years with that plan. And by the time I was 18, I had my commercial helicopter license. I went on to fly commercially. When I say commercially, never with the major airlines. I flew for American Eagle for a little while, commuter airline. I flew corporate. I flew what's called a King Air 200, which is a twin turboprop airplane, about a 300 mile an hour airplane, 10 passenger. And also flew, when I was flying corporate, I flew a Sikorsky S-76, which is a pretty good sized helicopter, substantial helicopter. Ours was set up to be able to carry up to 8 passengers, plus the 2 pilots. And like I said, started out very early on. That night, I was 19 when I got that job, and flew as a co-pilot on the King Airs and on the Sikorsky S-76. Eventually, I ended up flying in the Army National Guard. I was a co-pilot gunner on the Apache, the AH-64 Apache. I never was deployed. I was in during Desert storm. We got called up, but our unit was never deployed. I got out after that. I had started a small business. When I was flying in the National Guard, it required a good bit of my time, and I really needed more time to devote to my business, I felt like at that point. So I did leave the Army National Guard. I left flying altogether and started my own business. And so I've owned several small businesses over the years. My wife and I, we got married in 1990. And in 1993, our first son, Chase, was born. We ended up raising two boys, Chase and Justin. They were 7 years apart, both Eagle Scouts, both athletes, both played football and participated in track and field at the high school level and also Division II athletics. You'll learn more about Chase's story as we go on with more podcasts in the future, but the story's out there pretty much everywhere, all over the internet. If you search my name, you can find that story. My name is spelled Darryl, my first name, and Rodgers, Rodgers. But if you search my name on the internet, you'll probably find Chase's story out there on video somewhere. Chase died in a marijuana impaired wreck in 2014. It was his car, but he allowed an 18-year-old girl who had smoked with him and some other people in a park. He allowed her to get behind the wheel of his car. They had all just smoked marijuana. And then they got in Chase's car, left that park. They only made it a few miles before the driver lost control in a curve, running about 70 miles per hour. The car left the road, struck a tree. Chase died at the scene. The driver took her own life 7 months later. That started me on this journey of trying to understand addiction and trying to figure out how I could make a difference. And so today I'm a family recovery coach and interventionist. My job as a family recovery coach is really to work with the parents of a child battling addiction and help those parents gain control of their emotions so that they can set and maintain healthy boundaries with their child. Every parent who has a child battling addiction ends up on the emotional roller coaster to some extent. And being on that emotional roller coaster short circuits their influence, their ability to influence their child. It short circuits the relationship. It also short circuits the parent's ability to be able to make logical decisions because when we're emotional, logic goes out the window. So parents who are overly emotional can't make sometimes good decisions around their son or daughter battling addiction. I help them cut through what I call the fog of battle because I can be objective. I'm looking from the outside in and I can see the things that they can't see because they're right in the middle of it. They're blinded by the fog of battle. I hope if you're a parent or a family member listening to this podcast that you will learn some things from this about how you can manage your emotions better, how you can set and maintain those healthy boundaries better. I'll talk a lot about self-care, charting a course, or having a roadmap for your own future. I'll talk about developing a vision for your own future and setting goals and doing things that will prevent you from being hyper focused on what your child is doing. I'll be talking some about how you can communicate better with your child battling addiction. What are some of the things that you can do to improve your communication so that you're communicating more effectively with your child or your loved one battling addiction? I'll talk about strategies that you can implement that will put your loved one in the best position possible to be able to recover. I'll talk about strategies that you can implement to help influence them to go to treatment, to get the help that they need. So if you happen to be a parent listening to this episode, I want you to understand that I've walked in your shoes. I know what it feels like. to get that phone call in the middle of the night, and the first thought that pops into your head is that my child calling, and or is that the police calling, and what do they want? I know what it feels like to have the butterflies in the pit of your stomach that never seem to go away, because I've learned how to deal with those kinds of emotions. I had to learn how to gain control over my emotions, because I had a lot of emotions, not only surrounding Chase's addiction, but also once he died, the grief. And you're already grieving, you're grieving the loss of your child, who is not the same person that you raised. You're grieving the loss of their dreams. And I can help you cope with that grief. I can help you cope with all of the emotions that you're experiencing, because I lacked emotional control, and I had to come to I had to come to grips with that after Chase died. And it took me a little while, but I developed a process that works for me, that also works for other people when they will employ that process to gain control of my emotions, and for you to gain control of your emotions. That process will work if you put it to work for you, if you implement it. So I want to share that process with you, because emotional control is one of the first steps that you need to take to be able to, number one, get your life back, and number two, put your child in the best position that they can be in to recover. So hang on and listen to these podcasts coming up. Listen to these next podcasts, because some of the interviews are just going to be amazing to you. The information that you're going to get from these interviews that I've done and that I'm continuing to do, the knowledge, the hope that you're going to get, the inspiration to keep going, to keep fighting. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for joining me for this very first episode of When God Intervenes. And stay tuned. I'll be dropping more podcasts coming up. And I'm happy that you joined us. Hang in there with whatever you're going through with your loved one battling addiction. Keep the hope alive. I'll see you soon. Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.